Star Wars is back in theaters. 7 years. That is how long we waited. And the second the opening weekend numbers dropped, half the internet decided the movie already failed. $81 million domestic. Lowest Star Wars opening under Disney. The take started flying before the popcorn buckets were even cold. But here's the thing, and I mean this genuinely. The people screaming about those numbers are looking at the completely wrong scoreboard. Today we're going to talk about what The Mandalorian and Grogu actually accomplished, because I think most of the discourse has completely missed the point. And once you see what Lucasfilm was really going for here, the whole picture starts to make a lot more sense. Let us just get the numbers out of the way first, because context matters a lot here. The Mandalorian and Grogu opened to about $81 million domestically over the 3-day Memorial Day weekend, and $100 million over the 4-day holiday stretch. Globally, it pulled in around $167 million in its opening frame, and by the time we were recording this, is closing in on $250 million worldwide. Now, the press immediately compared that to Solo, a Star Wars story, which opened to roughly $84 million back in 2018, and that film is widely considered one of the bigger stumbles in the Disney Star Wars era. So you can see why people got nervous. But here's what those comparisons leave out. The Mandalorian and Grogu was reportedly made for around $165 million. That is by far the cheapest Star Wars film Disney has ever produced. So the break-even math is completely different from something like The Rise of Skywalker, which cost somewhere north of $275 million before marketing even entered the picture. We are also in a post-pandemic box office world. The whole industry has shifted. A $100 million opening weekend in 2026 lands in the top 4 domestic openings of the entire year. The same number in 2018 would have felt modest. In 2026, that is genuinely competitive. So before anyone writes the obituary, let us pump the brakes and ask what this movie was actually supposed to do. Here's something I think gets lost in the discourse. This was not a normal Star Wars movie production. Not even close. Disney and Lucasfilm had not put a Star Wars film in theaters since The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. That is a 7-year theatrical gap. And for most of that time, Star Wars lived entirely on Disney Plus through shows like The Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka. The decision to pivot The Mandalorian Season 4 into a full theatrical feature was not some long-planned master strategy. It was a fairly sudden creative and logistical shift. Jon Favreau had to take a story that was being developed as a streaming season and retool it into something worthy of an IMAX screen, a theatrical marketing campaign, and a summer release date. That is genuinely hard to do. The fact that the final product works as well as it does is, honestly, impressive under those conditions. And audiences agreed. The film landed an 89% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Exit scores from post-track were strong, especially among younger viewers. Critics were more divided at around 62%, but the people who actually bought tickets walked out satisfied. That matters. Okay, here's the part one really want to dig into, because I think this is the most underappreciated story coming out of this opening weekend. The Mandalorian and Grogu appears to be creating brand new Star Wars fans. Jon Favreau has been very open about this being intentional. The film was designed to work as an entry point. You do not need to have watched 3 seasons of The Mandalorian on Disney+. You do not need to know who the New Republic is or what happened at the end of Return of the Jedi. The movie works as a standalone father and son adventure set in the Star Wars galaxy. At its core, Din Djarin is a stoic, armored warrior who adopted a small green creature, and now they protect each other. That is a story that lands for literally anyone. You do not need a lore guide. The deep-cut Easter eggs and callbacks are in there for longtime fans, but they never get in the way of the main story. They sit on top of it. So a new viewer misses a wink, and a veteran fan catches it. Everybody wins. And you can see this playing out in real time. Look at the box office breakdown. The film was heavily driven by families. Parents bringing kids to their very first Star Wars movie in a theater. And those kids are walking out wanting to watch the whole series. Wanting to learn more, wanting merchandise, wanting more content. That is not a failure metric. That is franchise building 101. George Lucas built this entire mythology by making movies that kids could fall in love with. The Mandalorian and Grogu is doing exactly that in 2026. That here is another angle that I do not see discussed nearly enough. This was the first time in the history of the franchise that characters who exclusively existed on a streaming service made their theatrical debut. Din Djarin and Grogu have never been in a movie before this. They live on Disney+. The question Lucasfilm needed answered was, can these characters carry a full theatrical feature? And the answer is yes. The visual effects are noticeably elevated beyond the show. The IMAX sequences, particularly the opening action set piece, are genuinely cinematic in a way that streaming simply cannot replicate at home. The tone and feel of the characters survived the transition completely intact. Favreau preserved what made the show work while expanding the scale appropriately. That matters enormously for what comes next, because Dave Filoni has a much larger project in the pipeline. It was originally announced at Star Wars Celebration back in 2023 as a massive crossover film designed to bring together storylines from The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, and other connected shows. Grand Admiral Thrawn as the central threat. Years of interconnected Disney Plus storytelling converging in one theatrical event. That film has been delayed. It is waiting on Ahsoka Season 2, and the sheer complexity of weaving multiple show arcs into a single movie is part of why it is taking time. But it is still happening, and The Mandalorian and Grogu just functioned as a proof of concept for it. It proved that existing Star Wars streaming audiences will show up to the theater for these characters. It proved the transition works. It laid the groundwork for something much bigger that I want to address, something that honestly drives me a little bit crazy in the online Star Wars conversation. There is a very loud portion of the fandom that essentially requires every Star Wars film to be a galaxy-shaking, Skywalker-adjacent, Death Star-level event. If there is no chosen one, no ancient prophecy, no planet-destroying superweapon, some people declare the whole thing pointless. And that thinking is a trap. The Star Wars galaxy is enormous. It has thousands of years of history, dozens of species, hundreds of planets, and countless stories that have nothing to do with Jedi or Sith or lightsabers. One of the most celebrated entries in the entire franchise, Rogue One, barely had any Force users at all. Its power came from grounded, human-scale stakes. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a personal story. A bounty hunter and his adopted kid. The stakes are emotional rather than cosmological. That is a completely valid type of Star Wars story. It is not lesser than the Skywalker saga. It is just different. If you walked in expecting a galaxy-ending threat and a billion-dollar spectacle, that expectation was set by your imagination, not by anything Favreau or Lucasfilm ever promised. The trailers were clear about what this movie was going to be. And honestly, having a Star Wars story with smaller personal stakes is refreshing. The galaxy does not need to be ending every single film. Sometimes a dad and his kid going on an adventure is enough. Sometimes that is exactly the right story for where the franchise is. Where does all of this leave us? Lucasfilm under Dave Filoni is clearly building toward something. Ahsoka Season 2 is coming. The crossover event film is still in development. Sean Levy is directing a brand new Star Wars film called Starfighter, set for 2027, with an entirely new cast. The Rey-focused new Jedi Order movie is also in the pipeline. Star Wars is not contracting. It is actually spreading out across multiple fronts simultaneously. And The Mandalorian and Grogu, whether it hits $500 million or not, just proved that theatrical Star Wars still works. It proved streaming characters can make the jump to the big screen. It proved new audiences can be brought into this universe. The real test for Lucasfilm is sustaining that momentum, keeping the quality consistent, not flooding the market, making each film feel like it earns its existence rather than just filling a release slot. By that measure, The Mandalorian and Grogu earns its place in the franchise. It was made with craft and intention. It served a clear creative purpose. It delivered for the people who watched IT.S. The next time someone tells you this movie failed because it did not cross $1 billion, ask them what success actually looks like to them. Because a movie that brings new fans into a franchise, transfers beloved characters to a new medium, and sets up years of future storytelling, That sounds like winning to me. The way